being judged, being under a microscope, everybody breaking down who you are as a human being, that is uncomfortable. Sandra Bullock has stated that the process of being sized up all the time, not just by the media but by colleagues, can be overwhelming. Fame equals praise, recognition, and opportunity, but it also equals scrutiny, whispered comparisons, and rivalries that sometimes take years to fully comprehend. She remembered that even after years, it seemed like something that was always present, something which nestled in the crook of her arm. There were times when she met someone in the eye and thought he was wise, much wiser than people expected him to be. Hollywood tends to take that sort of wisdom away and give in place of a competition. Sandra Bullock is Hollywood's golden girl, gallant, down-to-earth, and ever smiling on the screen. But even America's sweetheart has weathered the dark side of her Hollywood tale. Behind the glamorized veneer are rivalries turned industry lore, behind-the-scenes drama that informed critical junctures in her career, and friendships that only flowered after years of aloof distance. Some of her conflicts came close to being almost theatrical in their competitiveness, while others brewed silently in the background of her ascension to the pinnacle. Among the most shocking was with Angelina Jolie. For years, the Gossip Weekly staged it as a love triangle involving Brad Pitt, but that was never the actual story. The truth was far more complicated, based on ambition and prestige. The film that ignited the Cold War was Gravity in 2013, a movie that tested physical stamina, but rewrote Bullock's image as a top dramatic star. Angelina Jolie had looped the project for several years, viewing it as the ideal moment to reboot her career path. She needed to demonstrate that she was more than capable of demanding not only critical success, but box office clout in one fell swoop. But when the movie eventually went into production, it was Sandra who battled for the role and secured it. She herself went on to confess, "I fought for Gravity. It wasn't handed to me. I worked my ass off to prove I could carry that film." To everyone else, it was a tale of perseverance. To Jolie's team, however, it was a dig, a suggestion that Sandra had achieved what Angelina hadn't. The tension mounted further when Sandra's Hollywood friendships started building alliances that marginalized Jolie. Jennifer Aniston and Brad Pitt, two of Angelina's most high-profile relationships, were more intimate with Sandra. She and Pitt co-starred in Bullitt's Train and The Lost City, and Bullock consistently defended him in interviews as one of the kindest co-stars she has ever had. To outsiders, it looked like a quiet but powerful Hollywood block forming, Sandra with Brad and Jen on one side, Angelina left standing apart on the other. The rivalry wasn't explosive, but it was unmistakable. Angelina, when asked, offered little more than a curt remark. "I wish her the best, truly, but we're very different people. Quite different." Sandra, on the other hand, frequently commented on actresses who believed the world owed them work, observations taken as thinly veiled jabs. To this day, the two do not see each other. They do not exchange barbs publicly, but they do not meet. For Sandra, Gravity was her defining victory. For Angelina, it is the part that got away, and in Hollywood, that type of injury never really does. If the tale of Angelina was about work competition, Julia Roberts embodied another form of tension. Previously created by media, Julia Roberts and Sandra Bullock were the two queens of 90s romantic comedies, each referred to as America's sweetheart. Both loved globally, they never collaborated. However, a truth which merely accentuated rumors of a feud. When Speed launched Sandra into superstardom in 1994, the media immediately labeled her the next Julia Roberts. Julia seethed at the comparison, eventually conceding that she believed it was silly and annoying. But the story persisted. The media required rivalries, and two women with parallel career paths were easy grist. Sandra leaned into the ridiculousness years later in an awards acceptance speech when she made a joke about reports of fights between her and Julia over George Clooney. She laughed and said they shared custody and both didn't mind, mocking the idea that women were forced to fight each other over men. The joke was humorous, but it had a basis in fact. The public desired a catfight that just wasn't present. Julia herself dismissed the gossip, once stating that if people perceived a feud, that was more about their own projections and not necessarily reality. Ultimately, Sandra and Julia's so-called rivalry became more of a ghost than fire. It was never real in anyone's life, only a narrative told by desperate tabloids craving drama. The lack of camaraderie wasn't evidence of hostility, it was two women forging different trajectories in an industry that demanded comparison. All of Sandra's tales weren't tales of competition only. A few featured personal entanglements, such as with Ryan Gosling. They starred together in Murder by Numbers in 2002, and their chemistry seemed to jump from the screen. Gosling was just 21, an upstart newcomer, whereas Sandra was 38 and firmly established. The professional relationship soon blossomed into a romance, and they spent 2 years living what Gosling recalled as some of the best years of his life. He termed her one of the greatest girlfriends he ever had. Sandra conceded that he grounded her, forcing her to pace herself and concentrate. She even referred to him as her little Buddha. But the romance collapsed under the pressure of show business. Their calendars were grueling, their careers exacting, and the age difference only made the pressure more. Gosling later said that when both individuals are show business-oriented, it absorbs all the light with no space for anything else to develop. Sandra repeated that their relationship just wasn't destined to work, not due to acrimony, but because of timing. The media, however, spun it differently, portraying the breakup as acrimonious. In fact, both still talked warmly of each other. Gosling credited her with influencing his mindset in the early days of Hollywood, while Sandra credited him with teaching her how to remain calm in a storm. What tabloids orchestrated as feud was actually a romance that couldn't survive the scrutiny of the spotlight, leaving behind lessons instead of grudges. Then came Meryl Streep, arguably Sandra's most anomalous rivalry. When The Blind Side placed Sandra into direct competition with Streep during award season, a light-hearted yet slashing back and forth ensued. Sandra once left Meryl a message threatening she would take her down, and Meryl returned the favor by sending her dead orchids with a message to die. Sandra replied by sending alcohol, instructing her to toast to white trash. The exchange was the stuff of legend, a playful but pointed go-round of two legends. Sandra would later say Meryl could be cruel, that she would tear your dress up when you weren't paying attention. But below the banter was profound respect. The rivalry was never mean-spirited. It was more of a stage fight that kept both women on their toes. By subsequent award seasons, they jokingly insulted each other, their competition being more about mischief and competitiveness than hatred. Another name associated with Sandra's list was Jennifer Aniston. During the 90s, Hollywood lived off the women being pitted against one another, and Sandra and Jennifer were not exempt. They both were rom-com queens, both had girl-next-door appeal, and even their lives intersected personally via Tate Donovan, who dated each of them at different points in time. The media voraciously fed the notion of competition, pitting them against each other as rivals for characters, attention, and love. Sandra has since revealed that the business did not want women to be friends, that it was founded on separation. For years, she and Jennifer stood aloof. But all that changed in 2010 when they first met at a wedding. They laughed together, drank together, and found out how much they really had in common. An honest friendship developed. Sandra then commended Jennifer for being so generous, as she never did anything for herself. Jennifer also consoled Sandra in times of fear, including one flight on which Sandra confessed she wasn't in good shape. Their friendship developed from what was once competition, a Hollywood rarity of women transforming imposed tension into genuine connection. And then there was George Clooney, the king of Hollywood pranks. Clooney's elaborate pranks were the stuff of legend, but on the Gravity set, Sandra wasn't playing along. The physically demanding nature of the film left no time for indulgences, and she banned his antics outright, referring to him as an overgrown frat boy behind her back. Clooney was abashed, admitting she was the only co-star who ever did. But the conflict was a symptom of a deeper rift. Clooney lived for humor, Sandra lived for control and discipline. They were oil and water. Nevertheless, when Sandra subsequently requested that his production company remake Our Brand is Crisis for her, he acquiesced. Offstage, they playfully jibe and compliment each other, but from the inside, their work habits never quite complemented each other. Sandra put it best herself. Clooney is an excellent friend, but not necessarily an excellent co-star. Gazing across Sandra Bullock's so-called Hollywood rivalries, there is a salient theme. They were not about trivialized scores. They were about boundaries, professionalism, the struggle to be recognized, and the way Hollywood women too often have to be pitted against each other by an industry and a media that feed on antagonism. With Angelina Jolie, the tension was ambition and lost opportunity. With Julia Roberts, it was perception and invention by the media. With Ryan Gosling, it was love muddled by circumstance. With Meryl Streep, it was competitive trickery. With Jennifer Aniston, rivalry became one of Hollywood's most solid friendships. With George Clooney, it was different working styles on a set that required single-minded concentration. Sandra Bullock is still America's sweetheart, but her tale holds the secret to how she earned that nickname. Even the most popular star has patience limits. Even the most charming actress has to draw lines, sometimes. And in Hollywood, where ego, ambition, and perception all seem to conflict with each other, making it through without making a few enemies is almost impossible. Whether they reflect her no-nonsense professionalism or merely her unwillingness to put up with certain antics, one thing is certain. Sandra Bullock's Hollywood experience has been characterized not only by success, but by the battles she waged, the lines she drew, and the dignity with which she weathered them all.